Well, I think the starting point should be the fact that when I walked in here tonight, they were playing Patti Smith, and seemed to be playing Patti Smith throughout the whole evening, which was very interesting, because I finally met up with her in New York a couple of days ago, and she was a very early and still an abiding influence, and her record Horses was a massive event for me, to the extent that it defined friendships. When that came out, I lost friends over it because they didn't relate to it, and it was such a strong reaction that they felt alienated by that record, and I felt alienated from those people because they couldn't relate to it. So I didn't really want to know them, and anybody that could relate to it, I wanted to know them, and they wanted to know me. So it was a defining moment, that record, and it was really interesting because it was such a pure rock and roll statement, and it was coming up with all these references to poets like Rimbaud that I discovered a few years before that. I had a friend in school who was known as X. He was precocious and hyper intelligent and very interesting guy, and he turned me on to Rimbaud and Baudelaire and William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg, etc., etc. So when that record came out and she was talking about Go Rimbaud, it just made such a connection, you know. And she's a real poet and somebody who just obviously had rock and roll, you know, in her veins, and it was just incredibly liberating. And I've always missed her live because I've always had a gig or something. I've had to leave town when she's in town. Always, like from the first time she played at the Roundhouse in London in the 70s, I wanted to get to that so bad. And I had a gig, I was in a punk band and we were playing a gig, so you know, it was cool I suppose, but I couldn't see her. And I got a friend who's now her main roadie guy, who used to be my main roadie guy, so he invited me down to a rehearsal for, she was doing the David Letterman show the other night, and so he said, come down, you know. So I go into this little rehearsal space in New York, and they're just about to start, so it's good timing, and they did Because the Night about 3 times. I met her, and she's really charming, very human, really nice, and Lenny Kaye. And that was a big thing because another major influence was his Nuggets collection he put together. All the mid '60s punk. So that was great. Things always seem to happen in New York. These meetings always seem to occur. And coming in today, I mean, this shows the power of music. It just the synchronicity of that playing. I was, to be honest, I was like really as I said, sleep deprived, and I didn't feel like doing a gig. The minute I walked in that door and I heard Patti Smith playing, it was Horses, I felt really glad to be here, and I felt like doing the gig, you know. Slow fear. Interesting question. Slow fear. I don't know, that's got something to do with time. I used to do a version of Fear is a Man's Best Friend. It brings that to mind. And I recorded it with, I was with Sonic Boom, but he was around. And I remember playing the guitar with these soft beaters. I open tuned the guitar and I was just like hammering on the guitar. And that was always a very compelling title, Fear is a Man's Best Friend. So, if fear is a man's best friend, slow fear must mean that, I think it's something like when you're in an accident and time slows down and you see everything in slow motion, and that's slow fear. And it's just a way of being able to deal with an extreme set of circumstances, and it's all to do with survival. So slow fear kicks in so that you can survive whatever you are fearful of. Tree Man with his bandwagon. Tree Man is the Green Man, the mythical green man of English folklore, and his bandwagon are shamanic druids. Veil of Chrome. That's something to do with the death of motorcyclists, and that puts me in mind of the track Motorcycle and I Feel Speed that Love and Rockets did. And I Feel Speed came out of Motorcycle very naturally. We only had the one track, Motorcycle, and when we were recording that we just kept playing and we went into the other thing. It was very arresting and it was improvised and very powerful, and my impression of that when we were making it was that this was about a motorcyclist that had been involved in an almost apocalyptic accident and been torn to pieces, and he was dead, but he didn't know that, and as far as he knew he was still on his motorcycle, and he went through a veil of chrome.
I'll let my sweater figure it out.
That makes me think of Haunted When the Minutes Drag, and yeah, that was really about an obsession I had with this girl who was at art school, and I was so nervous to speak to her that I couldn't do that. But she used to leave like her clothes, like a cardigan or a shirt or something, and I remember like touching this piece of clothing. It still somehow retained her shape and her line, and very obsessive. Mermaid and Pharaoh. It's a very unconventional interview. I like it. That's got something to do with the Nile and the fact that the constellation of Orion maps out perfectly onto the pyramids in Egypt, and what a mind-blowing concept that is, that the Egyptians should have been able to harness such knowledge. And how did they know? You know, and they were creating heaven on earth in effect, and somehow that mythical power that is known as a mermaid was somehow part of their mythology, although they wouldn't have called it a mermaid. I don't know what they would have called it, but it was there, and it lives in the Nile. Indoor cat. There is always one part of an indoor cat that is outside and can never come inside because it's wild and it's feral, and there's something very appealing in that. Any cat has something of the big, like any small cat, domestic cat, has something of the big cat in it, and I think that's part of the fascination with cats, that we think that they are domesticated and we've tamed them, but there's always a glint of the wildness in any pussycat.